Okay, so we are on chapter 13 from Banner in the Sky, and this is called Four to Go. And if you remember, Rudy had taken a little bit too much time up on the mountain, and he is in a little bit of trouble. So a few minutes after noon, John Winter and Emil Saxo reached the head of the Broly Glacier and moved up onto the rocks beneath the hut. They moved slowly, for their backs were heavily laden. A corner of white bandage showed under the brim of Winter's hat. Reaching the rocks, he paused and looked up at the mountain. Whoopsie. We were sliding. And looked up at the mountain. The mist is lifting, he said. Saxo nodded. Ja, if the sun comes out, it should be all right for tomorrow. The Englishman's glance moved to the hut. Its door was closed and no smoke came from the chimney. It doesn't look as if the boy's back yet, he commented. Of course he is not back, nor will he be. I think he will. Saxo shook his head. No. The boy himself, perhaps he would come, but his uncle or the other curtailers, they would not, nor would they let him. It is as I have told you, the curtailers are no mountaineers. They are afraid of the citadel. Silently, they moved up over one of the boulders. In 5 minutes, they reached the hut, opened the door, and stopped, staring. No one was in it, but packs of food and equipment lay ranged around the walls, and both table and fireplace showed obvious signs of recent use. Winter glanced at the guide, and a smile touched his lips. So they wouldn't come, he said. Saxo's narrowed eyes moved over the rows of packs. The boy and his uncle, he said, could not have carried all this. Winter shook his head. There are more now, many more. The two men unslung their own packs. Then Winter went to the door and looked up and down the slope. Rudy, he called. Rudy, and then Franz. There was no answer, no sound at all, and he re-entered the hut. Saxo was still staring at the row of packs. 6, he muttered. There are at least 6 of them. But who? Why? Suddenly he smashed fist into palm and almost shouted, They have plotted something, those curtailers. There is scheming, trickery. Trickery, said Winter. That so many have come, and I ask you, why have they come? Not to climb the citadel. No, the curtailers are afraid of the citadel. I will tell you why. It is to keep us from climbing it. Keep us? Yes, they are afraid, but they are also jealous. What they cannot do themselves, they do not want to be done by a man of Broly. Saxo was working himself into a dark rage, and his huge hands opened and closed. But I will show them, he went on. They can bring 6 or 60, their whole village, and still they will not stop me. They will see what a man of Broly can do. Emil, Winter's voice was sharp. Stop this nonsense. It is not nonsense. It is what I tell you. A scheme, a curtailer trick. The guy relapsed into sullen silence. Winter sat down at the table, rubbing his jaw meditatively, and when he spoke again, it was more to himself than to Saxo. So 6 have come, he said. The boy, his uncle, and 4 others. And I am not surprised. No, for if Franz Lerner would come, others would come too. In their hearts, the curtailers want to climb the citadel as much as we do. Rudy goes down to the village and speaks to his uncle speaks to the other guides, and this morning they come up. They start early, and they arrive before us. And when they see we are not yet here, they decide to... He broke off, puzzling. To what? Demanded Saxo. Climb the mountain in new snow, without their packs? To reconnoitre, perhaps. What should they reconnoitre? I don't know how to pronounce that word, and I'm sorry. I need to look that up. When the boy has already been up past the ice fall. No, it is trickery, I tell you. They are hiding from us, lying in wait for us. Rot. Winter jumped to his feet, and he paced up and down. He went to the door, looked out, and came back again. Several times he was on the point of speaking, but each time changed his mind. The more he tried to think of it out, the more confusion deepened. If Rudy had told them, no. Or if the 6 planned to, no. None of the ifs made sense. All we can do is wait, he said. Sitting down again, he opened his pack and sorted out its contents. Saxo stared moodily at the floor. Then simultaneously both men looked up. For from outside, at first faintly, then more and more plainly, came the sound of approaching footsteps. Once more Winter leapt up. We won't have to wait, he exclaimed. They're here. The next instant the door opened, and Franz Lerner appeared. Behind him was the guide, Andreas Krickel, and behind him, in turn, the 2 Tonglich brothers and Klaus Wesselhoff. Last of all was the old T.O. Zerbrigger, and as he entered the hut, he closed the door behind him. Franz looked at Winter, at Saxo, then back at the Englishman. His chin was thrust forward, and his face was grim. Where is the boy? He asked. The boy? Said Winter. My nephew, Rudy Matt. Where is he? Isn't he with you? With us? How can he be with us? Franz took a step forward. Let us stop the pretense, my captain. We know that the boy is up here, that he came to join you. Yes, of course he joined me, but he left yesterday morning. He went down to Kurtal. To Kurtal? You mean he didn't arrive? There was a pause, and Franz looked at the companions and then back at Winter. I do not know what you are talking about, he said. 3 nights ago the boy ran away. Ran away? Repeated Winter. Yes, from his mother's house, and he didn't have permission? Permission? To come here? Of course not. Franz's eyes narrowed. That is what he told you, eh? That he had permission? Winter nodded. Why, the little faker. For a moment a smile touched his lips, but only a moment. As the guide went on, his face grew tense and troubled. He sneaked away, said Franz. He left a note that made it plain he was going to the mountains, and when we heard that you were here, we were sure that he had come to you. Yesterday morning we started up to find him, to bring him back. We reached this hut at noon, but there was no one here. All afternoon we searched, on the glacier, on the moraines, up the ice fall, but we found nothing. So we returned and spent the night here. Today we searched again and still found nothing until we saw you, an hour ago, coming up the Broly Glacier. Are you sure, Winter asked, that you couldn't have missed him on the trail? The trail? Coming up yesterday from Kurtal while he was going down. Franz shook his head. It is impossible. There is only the one way, along the glacier, along the path. He took another step forward, and his eyes were dark and angry. No, the boy did not come down, he said. He is still here. You are hiding him from us, and I demand... Something in Winter's face made him stop. Slowly his own face changed, and when he spoke again, his voice was low and strained. You mean he is not here, Captain? You give me your word. No, he is not here. Where is he then? Franz asked. Winter sat down at one of the benches by the table and stared silently at the floor. Then, raising his head, he told quietly of what had happened the day before. The guide stood motionless, listening, and when Winter had finished, there was, for a few moments, no sound or movement in the room. Then Andreas Krickle said, We must go back down the glacier. And look in every crevice, said Paul Tanglich. It is all we can do, the only hope. They looked at Franz, who stood as if he were carved of stone, and at last his lips moved. His mother, he murmured. My sister. What shall I tell her? What will she do? He spoke as if from the depths of a trance. Then they fixed on Emil Saxo, standing alone to one side, and suddenly the tide of pain and anger welled up in him. And you, he shouted, you, man of Broly, what do you say to all this? Saxo stared back at him. I? He said. What have I to do with it? You have everything to do with it. If it were not for you, the Englishman would not be here. The boy would not have come. You call yourself a guide, eh? You think you are better than the guides of Kurtal? So tell me what kind of guide it is who cannot take care of his party, who looks out only for himself, who stands like a dumb ox while a boy is in danger, is just... Saxo took a step forward. Watch your tongue, man, he said. I do not take such talk from a Kurtaler. You will take more than talk. It's because of you this thing has happened, and you will pay for it. The two men glowered at each other. Then Franz, too, stepped forward, and the other Kurtal guides moved up beside him. Yes, make him pay, said Peter Toglich. We will show him, said Klaus Wesselhoff, the boaster from Broly, the coward from Broly. We'll see who's the coward, roared Saxo. Come on, you Kurtal sheep, I'll take on the lot of you. He doubled his ham-like fists, and Franz lowered his head like a bull, and in another moment they would have been at each other, but John Winter leapt between them. Stop it, he commanded. Then he wheeled on the others. Stop it, all of you. The guides looked at him sullenly, as with both hands he pushed Franz and Saxo away from each other. I'm sick of this nonsense, he snapped. Broly, Kurtal, Kurtal, Broly. One of you is as bad as the other, as stupid as the other, fighting about your damned villages, snarling like animals, while the boy is probably... His voice stopped, as if cut off by a knife. He was no longer looking at the men, but past them, at the door of the hut, and now, in the sudden stillness, the others turned and stared too. Mother of God, someone murmured, for in the doorway stood Rudy Matt. His slight body was bent with tiredness, his clothing was in tatters, dirt mixed with wet snow caked his face and hands, and streaks of blood showed on his fingers and cheeks. But as he faced the others, he drew himself straight. His lips were smiling, and his eyes shone with the blue of the mountain sky. I have found the way, he said to them. I have found the way. Franz was the first to move, his anger forgotten, Saxo forgotten. He hurried forward and grasped the boy by the arm. You are alive, he explained. You are alive and all right. Yes, I'm all right, said Rudy, and I have found the way. The way? Past the fortress, to the top of the citadel. Franz gaped at him, and the others gaped. You mean you have been on the citadel? His uncle asked incredulously. Yes, since yesterday. I was caught in a storm, and then it got dark. I had to spend the night. It doesn't matter. Rudy's voice was almost shaking with excitement, because I found it. Truly the way around the fortress, and father looked for. I found it, and I climbed it. Climbed it? Yes, to the left there was a chimney, and I climbed to the top of it. Above the fortress there is a ridge again, and it is easy. I could not go on. The storm came, and it was late, but I could see from where I stood. It was easy, all the way to the shoulder. There was silence and 8 pairs of staring eyes. In Franz Lerner's eyes was a turmoil of conflicting emotions, relief and bewilderment, anger and uncertainty, and beneath these, deeper than these, something that was close to awe. But it was not Franz who spoke next. It was Theo Zurbriggen, who now suddenly limped forward, his old face shining with excitement. "So you have done it, boy. You have shown them," he cried, "and I am proud of you. Your father would be proud of you." Rudy stammered, and he stopped. He had no more words. He looked from old Theo to Franz, trying to read the expression on his uncle's face. Captain Winter came up and put an arm around him. "You're tired, son," he said. "Come sit down, rest." He turned to the others. "The boy must be starving. Get him some food." He and Theo led Rudy to the table. They took off his pack, his boots, his wet clothing. They wrapped a blanket around him. Some of the guys started a fire. Others got food from their packs. Only Franz Lerner stood motionless, watching, as if in a trance from which he could not rouse himself. "Here now." They brought him hot tea. They brought him hot porridge and bread and cheese. And while he ate, he told the story of his solitary adventure. "And the whole night," said Andrews Crickle. "All of it. You stayed up there alone?" "Yes, sir," said Rudy. "You were not afraid?" asked Paul Toglich. "Yes, I was afraid." "But nothing happened?" "No." "There were no spirits?" asked Klaus Wetzelhoft. "No ghosts or demons?" There was a pause, and the men's eyes were fixed on Rudy. "No," he told them. "No ghosts, no demons." Captain Winter began asking about the details of the route, and he described them as best he could, but his glance kept wandering to Franz, who still stood motionless and apart until at last he could no longer bear the weight of the silence. "Uncle," he said. "Yes." "You are angry?" Franz shrugged. "What is the use of anger?" And he could scarcely speak the word. "And mother?" "I had thought you'd forgotten you had a mother," said Franz. Rudy winced. "No," he murmured, "I have not forgotten. You simply don't care what you do to her?" "Yes, I care, only you care more for your wild schemes," said Franz. "Yes, I know." He paused, and he went on, and his voice was hard and flat. "It is because of your mother that I am here," he said. "For myself, it no longer matters what you do. You are crazy like your father, and will probably kill yourself like your father. But if you do not think of your mother, I think of my sister. I said to her, I will come up after you. If you are still alive, I will find you. All right, you are alive. You have eaten and rested. Come on now, we shall go down." Abruptly, he turned and thumped across the hut to the doorway, and the others watched him, and Rudy did not move. "Well?" said Franz, turning. The boy hesitated. His eyes pleaded, and Franz moved back into the room as if to take him by the arm, but a small, gnarled figure stepped quickly in front of him. "No," said Theo Zurbriggen. Franz looked at him without speaking. "You cannot do this. No, you must not. It is not fair to him." "Fair? What do you mean, not fair? The boy has disobeyed and defied me. He has defied his mother. He has thieved, connived, lied." "Yes, of course he has." Theo's voice was heated. "And do you know why? Because you have driven him to it, you and his mother. Because you have tried to make him something he is not. Of course he had done these things, and so would I in his place, and so would anyone." Franz's face was dark. "Keep out of this, old man," he said. "It is no business of yours." "Yes, it is my business. I have climbed with Rudy's father on every mountain around Kortel, and I have climbed with the boy on the Felsberg, and I know what he can do. To climb it is in his blood, it is in his bones. Give him a chance, and he will become an even greater climber than his father." Franz did not want to listen. He started to brush past, but now a new voice broke in, a quiet, yet completing voice that made him stop and turn. "He's right, Franz," said John Winter. Franz was silent. "He's right, and you know he's right." The Englishman came closer and stood before him. "You feel you owe loyalty to your sister, and I understand that," he said. "But there's also something you both owe to the boy, and that's the freedom to be himself. He's a born mountaineer. For years now, I've climbed all through the Alps, and I've never seen a better one. Yes, he's young, and he still has things to learn, but the most important things he doesn't need to learn because he has them already. And most of all, he has the will to climb, and he has the heart. Yes, he disobeyed you," Winter went on, "and he lied to me, but he meant no harm by it. As Theo says, he was only doing what he had to do. And on the Citadel, there too, he was only doing what he had to do because he knew that if he went down to Kurtal, he could not come up again. Yes, it was a risk. It was foolish and impetuous, but it was magnificent. He followed his father, and he went higher than his father, and he found what is probably the only way up the mountain. Don't make him go down now, Franz. Tomorrow we're going to try for the top. Let him come with us. Give him the chance. It's his birthright, and he's earned it." There was a long silence. Franz looked at Winter, then at Theo, then back to Winter. "Franz," said the Englishman. "Yes." "Why have you come up from Kurtal?" "I've told you, because the boy was here." "Yes, I know. But was that the only reason?" "I do not. Wasn't it also," said Winter, "because Saxo and I were here? Because you knew we were here to climb the Citadel?" Franz did not answer. He was staring at the floor, but the eyes of the other guide moved to the man from Broly who was sitting alone near the fireplace, splicing 2 lengths of rope. "Yes," said Andreas Crickle suddenly, "because of Saxo, too." "Because he has no business here," said Paul Toglich. "The hut belongs to us of Kurtal. The Citadel is the mountain of Kurtal, and he is a trespasser." Saxo looked up at them, then he put his ropes aside and got slowly to his feet. The mountain of Kurtal, he repeated. Or perhaps you mean the mountain of Broly. For 10 years I have come to this hut, and I have circled the citadel, and I have explored the routes to it, and never once up here have I seen a Kurtaler. There has been no guide of Kurtal since Joseph Matt, who was not afraid to look at it. A murmur of anger rose around him, but the giant from Broly paid no attention. Yes, you are the great mountaineers, he taunted them. Captain Winter comes to Kurtal. For days he is there trying to find a guide, and who will go with him? No one. So he comes to Broly, and he speaks to me, and I say, yes, I will go. And only then does it become your mountain, because you are jealous, because you do not want to see a better man do what you cannot do yourselves. The murmur grew louder. The men of Kurtal edged forward, and only Franz Lerner still stood motionless with his eyes on his floor. Watch what you say, Saxo. Boaster. Liar. Yes, liar, said Tio Zurbergen. With all your talk, what have you done? I have at least been on the citadel, reached the fortress. You, yes, conceded Saxo. For you alone, old man, I make an exception. But your day is done now, and the rest of you, his eyes moved arrogantly from one to another. You are sheep, chickens. You are afraid to come even as far as this hut until you are shamed into it by a boy. The curtailers glared. Their hands were clenched tight. Once again, it appeared only a matter of seconds before fists would be flying. Then once again something stopped them, but this time it was not Winter. Franz had at last raised his head. He was looking steadily at the man from Broly, and now his voice, though low and controlled, seemed suddenly to fill the little room. You think we are cowards, Saxo? He asked. I think what I see. That we are afraid of the citadel, Franz asked. Well, aren't you? No, I am not, said Franz. He paused. I have come here to climb it. There was a sound as if of a sharply caught breath, then silence, then a babble of voices, and among them old Tio's was the first and the loudest. Yes, yes, he shouted, almost beside himself with excitement. Yes, roared the others, to climb it, to climb it. That is why we have come, the guides of Kurtal, to the mountains of Kurtal, for the glory of Kurtal. John Winter stepped forward and put his arm around Franz's shoulder, and a smile wreathed his lean face, and his eyes were shining. Of course that's why you've come, he said, and I knew you would. I've known it all along. Franz looked at him uncomprehendingly. He did not return the smile, and his expression was deeply troubled. You are not angry, my captain? Angry? Good Lord, man, why should I be angry? That we must do this, that I must be your rival. Winter started to speak, but he went on quickly. I am sorry, sir, truly sorry. Many times you asked me to go with you, and I refused, and now I am here, and I must climb it without you. I am sorry, but I cannot help it. We of Kurtal cannot help it. We cannot stand by while the men of Broly mocks us, while he sets off with you to try to climb our mountain. No. We have heard the challenge, and we accept it, and it will be a guide of Kurtal, not of Broly, who will be the first to the top. Again, the men around him were shouting and cheering, and then above their voices came an even louder voice, like the bellow of a bull. The first, eh? Roared Saxo. We will see about that. We will see how you like it when I am on the summit rolling stones down at you, and you are running and bleeding like sheep. Boaster, said Franz. Coward, answered Saxo. We will show you. You will be shown. In their anger, momentarily, Winter had been forgotten. But he still stood between them, and he was no longer smiling. He had said no word while they shouted at each other, but now suddenly, as two guides looked at him, something in his face made them stop. No, he said quietly. No, Franz. No, Emil. It won't be like that. They stared at him. It won't be like that at all, said John Winter, because we are going together. There was a stunned silence. Together? On the citadel? No, said Fraxo. No, said Franz. We are going together, Winter repeated, or I, for one, am not going at all. You expect me to climb with a curtailer? And me with a man from Broly? That's exactly what I expect, said the Englishman. Here you stand, two of the best guides in Switzerland. Above you is the greatest mountain in Switzerland, and for years, Emil, you say you've dreamed of climbing it. And you too, Franz, you've dreamed it in your heart. Well, here you are now. Here's your chance. Are you going to take it or throw it away? His gray eyes fixed on one, then the other. What are you, he asked, men or children? Which means more to you, your stupid village presidences or climbing the citadel? Together we can do it, I tell you. Together we will be the strongest team that has ever climbed in the Alps. But separately, there's not a hope. Quarreling and competing, there's not a hope. The citadel is too great for that. It will have none of that. Those who get to the top will never do it by fighting each other, only by helping each other and by working together. He paused. There was not a sound in the hut. Franz, Emil, he said, I beg you, forget about Kurtal and Broly. Forget your squabbles and your foolish pride. Here we are, ready to go. The weather is clearing. Tomorrow will be fine. In the morning, we'll start off as a team pulling together, and the rest of you will stay here in support. It's the strongest possible combination. We'll have every chance of success. Take the chance, I beg you. Together, together. He stood between them, motionless, waiting. His lean face under its strip of bandage was tense with emotion, and the flame of his spirit gleamed in his eyes. Will you? He said. There was another silence. It was now or never. In the minds of Franz Lerner and Emil Saxo, the Englishman's appeal struggled with the pride and prejudices of generations. Franz looked at the floor and he looked back at Winter, and his very body seemed almost visibly to be swaying. And when at last he spoke, his voice was no more than whispered. Of all the heron I have ever had, my captain, he said, I respect you the most. As a climber, as a man, for anyone else I would not do this, could not do this. But for you? Winter's eyes moved to Saxo. Emil? Again a pause and a wavering, and the man from Broly drew in a long, slow breath. If there is no other way, he murmured. Winter's face was shining, and he shook Saxo's hand, and turning, he shook Franz. And now, he said, standing between them, and the guides faced each other motionless, and the guide from Kurtal and the guide from Broly. Now you, said Winter. Franz hesitated, Saxo hesitated, then slowly their hands rose and met. Simultaneously, the others pressed forward around them, and the hut shook with the hubbub of their excitement. So it is settled. Tomorrow is the day. On to the citadel, to victory. The three of you. No, not three, said Winter. 4. In the sudden silence that followed, he looked questioningly at Franz. That is right, is it not? He asked quietly. There are 4 to go. Franz did not answer at once, and for a moment he returned Winter's gaze, and then his eyes moved slowly past him to the corner of the room where Rudy had sat, forgotten during the long wrangle between the men. You are feeling all right, boy? He asked. Rudy had risen to his feet. Yes, uncle. You think you can climb tomorrow? Oh, yes, uncle. Franz shrugged and turned back to Winter. For you, my captain, I am doing these strange things, he said. God grant I shall not live to regret it. Wow, so good. Chapter 13 is over of Banner in the Sky. Man, so good.